Hello, welcome back to my channel and to my Trying to Like series where I take pieces of art or popular culture and I'm not sure whether I like them or not. I'm not sure whether they work for me or not. And today I want to look at the Dirty Harry franchise. Now, Dirty Harry came out in 1971. It was an immediate success for Clint Eastwood and for the director Don Siegel. Now, it belongs to a group of movies that I'm perhaps going to controversially call boys' movies. You know, kind of cult movies that lads watch. Things like Zulu and Clockwork Orange and Taxi Driver and Get Carter. You know, blokes' movies with blokes being blokes and being violent. That become, I think, the victim of their own success. By which I mean is that people start looking at them as cult movies and remember all the lines of dialogue, you know, like, did he shoot 5 or 6? Do you feel lucky, punk? You know, all that sort of stuff. They remember all those kind of cool bits when, you know, Clint Eastwood was being cool. But what gets lost is the original film and what the original film was trying to do and what it was trying to say. And what I'm going to try and argue in this video is that Dirty Harry, the original film, was actually very, very good indeed. And that its sequels and its success ruined it. And now that we don't actually see the film, the original film, for what it was. So it came out in 1971 and it was a cop thriller. And it was part of a developing trend that was developing throughout the 1960s where cops were becoming as tough and as hard-bitten and as dangerous as criminals. You know, in the same year, The French Connection, starring Gene Hackman, would win Best Oscar. And Dirty Harry is the ultimate example of this, where this guy is just a badass, right? He just goes around, you know, if he doesn't like somebody, he just blows them away, you know, with his Magnum 44 and all this sort of stuff, right? He's the ultimate sort of cop as criminal. What Siegel and Clint Eastwood have done here is they're playing on Clint Eastwood's cowboy image. And what they've done is they've thrown an old-time cowboy who shoots first and asks questions later into modern San Francisco. And what is happening is that the police service is reforming, it's becoming more liberal, it's, you know, it's not so dictatorial or fascistic perhaps. And so this kind of cowboy cop that Harry is he's an anachronism, right? And so we get, you know, Don Siegel is a good punchy, no-nonsense director. And he's making this good action movie with this kind of, this, you know, cowboy cop hero figure. And it's all put together with brilliant San Francisco locations. It's excitingly edited, and it has Lalo Schifrin's magnificent score. This brilliant score that combines elements of classical and funk. You know, you know, I absolutely love it. I think it's one of the best scores ever, right? But is that all that's happening here, right? The film starts with a wall devoted to those officers who've died in the course of duty. They've been shot in the course of duty. So it starts on this rather sad note. And as the film goes on, it's not making a statement. It's asking a question. Who is Dirty Harry? Why do they call him Dirty Harry? What's dirty about him? At one point, he's looking through a window at some woman, right? Is he dirty because he's a peeping Tom? That's what his new young partner thinks. Is he dirty because of the way he does his business? Is there something worse about him? We will find out as the film goes on that he's a fractured person because his wife has died, so he's lonely. So there's a question mark over why he's dirty. But this is part of a wider question that the film is asking. Let's look at cinema in the early 70s in America. Now, we have this kind of mythological idea about that era of American cinema, which I'm guessing most of us love. I've always loved it. And it's traditionally regarded as counterculture. It's part of a new youth movement that came along in the 50s with Easy Rider, picking up on the Nouvelle Vague in France, a new kind of independent spirit, quite leftist. You know, that's what we think of, isn't it, when we think of that era of cinema. But what if, in that counterculture period, that new period of liberalisation, the age of Aquarius and all that, a right-wing filmmaker or a right-leaning filmmaker said, I want to look at this counterculture world as well, and I want to make some questions about it. That's what Siegel and Eastwood are doing, right? They're saying, okay, there's this new liberal society. What does that mean for the law? If you're creating all sorts of new liberalities in society, where does that leave crime? If you're starting to say that there's no such thing as evil, but there's only mental ill health, or people who've had some sort of deprivation in their social upbringing, that's all very well. But what happens if someone's being threatened on a side street, right? This is where Dirty Harry comes in. It's asking a question. It's not a very subtle question, right? It's a blunt question. You know, Don Siegel likes blunt weapons. He's a bit like Sam Fuller in that respect. But he's asking a question that's important, and it's still important now. I mean, look in Britain at the moment, right? We're still asking these questions. You know, here's the police getting involved in diversity and wearing rainbows, etc. But how many burglaries get investigated? You know, our sort of openness about, say, for example, the criticism of Israel on the streets. Where do the police step in and say that could be anti-Semitic or it could be political? You know, these are questions, this question of the opening up of liberality and the way that that's impacting on how we see crime are questions that we're still involved in today. One thing I'd like to point out in this video is we have a traditional idea that cinema kind of grew up, right, in the 60s and 70s, threw off the shackles of convention and continuity and started, experimenting. But when you go back and watch those counterculture movies like Easy Rider, do you really feel that Easy Rider's got very much to do with the world you live in now? It seems dated, doesn't it, from another world? But Dirty Harry is asking a question that still feels relevant. Have we misinterpreted the 60s and 70s? Was that counterculture cinema so beloved of left and critics and academics really the cinema that took us forward, that we built our culture on? Or did we build our culture on Dirty Harry? I mean, Reaganism, Trumpism, it's an open question. But what happens is, the way that Siegel and Eastwood tackle this is they have this character comes in who's a complete psycho and just wants to kill everybody. And he looks nuts. I remember watching the film with my mum recently because they repeated all the Dirty Harry films over Christmas and I watched them all in one go. It's what led to this video. And of course, they deliberately picked this real nutter who's no one's friend, and he's just a killer, right? So there's no subtlety here, right? It's a basic question. What are you going to do? All your fancy schmancy ideas, but there's a killer on your doorstep. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Right, so it's that kind of movie. And Eastwood, of course, thinks, oh, you're crazy. I'm just going to shoot him, right? But then we come to the ending. How are Eastwood and Siegel going to answer this question? This conundrum that they've set. And how they answer it is this. Eastwood goes after him. They have a shootout sequence. Eastwood blows him away. And then he throws away his badge. Now, this is the key moment. Because now that Dirty Harry is just seen as an action movie franchise, this is seen as a sort of, tough guy. This is worthless. And walks off into the sunset. Good old Harry. But we're not seeing the original film as it came out in 71. That is a much more painful moment. Because what he does by throwing away the badge is he is understanding that he is no longer the law. He's a vigilante. He's no better in the law's eyes than the man he's killed. The law is not working anymore for him. And maybe it's not working for any of us. That's the answer that Siegel and Eastwood give us at the end. It's not, a tough guy moment. It's a tragic moment. It's a painful moment. Right? We think back to all those guys who died in the line of duty at the beginning. And at the end, this guy who's finally going to kill this guy thinks, actually, I'm no longer part of this. I no longer belong to it. It's not my identity anymore. And where does that leave the rest of us? Now, okay, it's quite a right-wing question. But nevertheless, it's an important one, and one we've got to wrestle with. And the film answers it in a very entertaining and stylish manner. That's Dirty Harry. But then, 2 years later or 3 years later, you get the sequel. And the sequel destroys everything. that the original film has built up. The sequel is called Magnum Force. Now, look, I love 70s Americana. I love the cars and the way people dress and the way people talk and the look of the cities. So I enjoy this film. It's kind of catnip to me, you know. You got a beer or a Coke or whatever your beverage is and you sit back, it's very entertaining. It's extremely exploitative, ludicrously violent and sexist and whatever, but it is very entertaining. And it's also wonderfully silly. So the story, right, is that there's this group of traffic cops. They look like they've come out of that series Chips in the 70s. And they're led by, of all people, David Soul. David Soul's an evil person in this film. But these traffic cops are all fantastic shots. They're just brilliant on the rifle range, and they can kill anyone at any distance. And these manic traffic cops, they've gone rogue, and they've gone vigilantes, and they're killing all the badasses in the city. Immediately, every question that the original film built up is ruined. Because you get cops that are worse than Clint Eastwood, right? So now Clint Eastwood is positioned as being just a straightforward goodie, right? And these are the real baddies, right? The whole question of what is our relationship to Dirty Harry is over. Now Dirty Harry's just one of the guys. He's a bit crazy, he's a bit maverick, a bit naughty, and he has his 44 Magnum, but he's essentially a good guy. And these are the bad guys. So all the ambiguity, all that rich texture of the original film is destroyed in one fell swoop, right? You know, it is a very enjoyable film to watch, but if you're watching it with your critic's hat on, you're just watching all the hard work of the original film just being eaten away, right? By the time you get to the third film, The Enforcer, which is also very entertaining and very 70s, and this time, of course, he's put with that ultimate, thing of the time, a female cop. What's she going to do when there's a shootout? Or when there's some tough guy to fight? A female cop. And so the whole start of the film plays with Clint Eastwood having to put up with this female cop who can't run as fast as the men and can't keep up. And it's all very sexist and rather silly. It's saved because the female cop is played by Tyne Daly, who's such a wonderful actress. Tyne Daly from Cagney and Lacey. I love Tyne Daly. She's got this kind of way, she does this sort of smile where she smiles like that, but she's actually really upset. And she does all that all the time. And there's always this kind of double meaning in her eyes. I can't do a Tyne Daly impression, but it's something like that. But she's a great actress, and she makes it work. She works so hard to make this concept work. But once again, what's happening here is that the Clint Eastwood character has just become a kind of laconic, wisecracking avatar of the sort of general right. General right wing, all these stupid newfangled ideas about policing. Harry will tell him, he'll show him, And so all the sort of the blunt weapon tactics of Siegel and Eastwood in that first film have been totally undermined and softened. The end result film is quite enjoyable, but everything is gone. By the time you get to the last two films, Sudden Impact in the 80s and The Deadpool in the 90s, those two films really are not very good films. I remember when Sudden Impact came out when I was about 12 years old. And I remember Barry Norman saying, it's great to have Dirty Harry back. It really isn't. It really is not great to have him back, because what happens now is Dirty Harry has just been reduced to being the level of a cop, who has, fun asides to his horrible bosses. And now all he gets is some kind of murder mystery, where this woman who was gang raped in the past takes revenge on her persecutors. All the original questions of the Dirty Harry film have been annihilated, right? And you also get these kind of comedy-like James Bond sequences. I can't remember, I forget whether it's in this film or whether it's in the Deadpool, where there's a sequence where, Clint Eastwood commandeers this bus full of old age pensioners going on a trip, and he does a chase scene with them in the back. It's like, what is this, a Roger Moore Bond movie? Also with Sudden Impact, his partner at the time, Clint Eastwood's partner at the time, was Sondra Locke, who I never really liked. I could never get what he saw in her, either as as an actress or as a person, really. But anyway, and she's in every one of his movies. And have you noticed how he always puts her in really horrible, compromising positions? And in two of his films, at least, she's gang raped. It's a bit horrible, actually. It's a bit icky. As for the Deadpool, the Deadpool is such a load of garbage. It really is. It's worth watching. It's got a very weird plot. These people are apparently being picked off. There's this group of people who've created this betting syndicate where they bet on who's going to die next, which famous celebrity is going to die next, and then these celebrities start getting picked off. But it turns out to be a kind of traditional murder whodunit plot, really. Again, the original questions of the first film are far away. It's worth watching the Deadpool for two interesting cameos. One is Jim Carrey turns up. Jim Carrey, who did a lethal Clint Eastwood impression in his early comedy career with his eyebrows, you know. And he turns up as this rock star who gets poisoned and OD'd. It's a very over-the-top performance. Apparently it amused Clint Eastwood no end. And also you get Liam Neeson turns up. And he's playing this film director, and he tries to put on this kind of London accent, and it really doesn't work. It's very embarrassing. And he wears this stupid ponytail throughout the film. It's a very poor movie. Sudden Impact and Deadpool are not worth watching. And you think, where did this go, right? This has just become a franchise for boys to sit there going, "Yeah, go on, Harry, you tell them, silly bit idiots," Whereas the original film is a tongue-in-cheek but genuine attempt to pose a question and to answer it in an entertaining, bums-on-seats way. I miss that Hollywood. I miss the Hollywood that could produce that kind of cinema. Don't you? That's my feelings about the Dirty Harry series. I'd love to know what you think about this series. Am I overrating the original film? Am I underrating the sequels? Let me know what you think below. Thanks very much.